Hello everyone and welcome to Aero Innovations. I'm Aero, your AI host. I have a super exciting episode for everyone today. This is not your usual vlog from the win. I'm not playing my usual 2-5 no limit hold'em game. This session takes place on September, Friday the 13th. We're playing at Resorts World in Las Vegas in a private game run by the Absolute Nuts channel. You can check them out here. They run a completely insane game every Friday and Saturday night that's live streamed. It's a 5-5 no limit hold'em game with no cap and a $5 ante that plays more like a 10-20 game, as the opening raises are usually between $50 to $100. Player stacks start out usually between 2,000 to 3,000 and end up around 5,000 to 6,000 by the end of the night. Get in contact with David if you want to be invited. This is the same game that you can see Frankie C playing at in his video here. So this game has all sorts of degenerate, crazy side games running at all times. For starters, there's the 7 deuce game. If you win a hand with 7 deuce, everyone owes you an additional $50. So on their 8-handed table, that's an additional $350. Secondly, the knit game is always in effect. The last player to get rid of their knit button owes everyone $25, so $175 for each game you lose. Third, there's a game called Tana. That's their own breed of crazy. If you're the only person to fold preflop, you owe everyone at the table $5. $5 to the dealer, $5 to the cameraman, and $5 to anyone standing around the table just watching. This incentivizes you to limp with absolute garbage like Jack Deuce offsuit. If no one loses to Tana preflop, the rule applies on the flop, except the stakes are doubled to $10, $20 on the turn, to an insane $40 on the river. My first time being invited to this game the Friday previous, I had no idea what I was doing and got manhandled for slightly over a whopping $3,600. I had to pay the Tana tax 3 or 4 times pre-flop and twice on the flop. Like, I would limp with Jack Deuce offsuit to avoid the $5 pre-flop Tana tax, only to fold to a $20 bet on the flop of like King 8-4 where I have no pair, no draw, and then be forced to pay out $90. All of their side games are designed to throw you off balance and take advantage of newcomers. They got me my first day. They got me hard. I came in this time mentally prepared. I swore I would take vengeance. I buy in for $2,000. Which is 400 big blinds. So the very first hand I play, only a couple minutes into the session, I'm dealt pocket aces in the big blind. The Rockets, my favorite bodybuilding governor of live action poker. Chase, a fellow pro from the win, limps under the gun. A rando who wanted to join our game raises to 30 in the +1 with a stack of about 2,300. He said he had just under an hour to play before his show started. Spoiler alert, he leaves much earlier than that with 0 doll hairs. Jonathan calls in the +1. The low jack and hijack fold. David 3-bets to 130 on the button. Mike the grinder folds in the small blind. Yes, that Mike. Michael Mizrachi, 6-time gold bracelet winner with over 17 million in tourney cashes. Everyone still has their knit buttons. David is most likely raising super light, as I've discovered is his typical MO when in position. However, I don't want to take this 4-handed. Plus, I'm out of position. I can't exactly slow play aces for that low of a price tag, so I put in a cold 4-bet to 350. With the knit game having just started, I could have anything here. If any of these guys have jacks or above, ace-king, or possibly even ace-queen, they're just going to get it in with me right here and now. Unfortunately, everyone folds, but this is still a great start to our session. We have to show our hand to get rid of our knit button. So I proudly tabled the Rockets. For this next hand, we're 45 minutes into the session. I limp with this very interesting hand under the gun. Yes, we're talking about pocket aces again, the Jean-Claude Van Damme of mixed martial arts. Y'all nubs who think limping with huge hands is an amateur move, prepare to watch a true Sith Lord at work. I'm about to prove to you how it can be deftly utilized by a master assassin.
Wipe them out, all of them.
So here, Chase folds in the +1. The middle position raises to 30 with 3K behind. He's replaced the rando in seat 9, who was already squashed in his first half hour. His name is Louis, and he's a friend of Mike's, which means he's likely loaded. Jonathan folds in the cutoff. He's also the low jack and hijack for this hand, I guess, since we're only 7-handed here. AJ calls on the button. Megan folds in the small blind. Mike suddenly 3-bets to 220 in the big blind. This is like such completely amazing news to my ears. Mike has about a $1,300 stack. That 3-bet is absolutely massive compared to the initial raise. He still has his knit button as well. I contemplate what to do for a moment, but come to the answer pretty quickly. That raise amount protects my stack from giving anyone good odds to play against my aces. If I just make the call, we're unlikely to go 4 ways here. On top of that, Mike might not even have a hand. He might just be trying to get rid of his nit button, or he might just be trying to win with 7 deuce. So I just smooth call. Louis calls as well in the middle position. The flop comes 3, 6, 6 with 2 clubs. This is gorgeous. Highly unlikely anyone flopped a set or trips on a board this low. Absolutely beautiful. Mike leads with a bet of 300. I double check my hand and notice I am holding the ace of clubs, so there's even less for me to worry about. I just call. Louis makes the fold. The turn brings a queen of spades. This is not my favorite card because it's possible that Mike might be holding pocket queens here, but when our opponent fires for 500 with less than 300 behind, I have only one move. I go all in. Unfortunately, Mike shows 7 deuce, so I don't think we were getting the last of that money anyways. I usually don't advocate slow playing, but with the various side games in effect, it brings in a completely different dynamic to this game. I make it the absolute maximum by playing my hand deceptively. 5 minutes later, I'm playing this silly game they've made up called Chihuahua. It's like a 5-card PLO double board bomb pot, except there are 6 communal cards on the board instead of 5. It's completely degen, trust me. I'm holding 5, 5, ace 6, jack with diamonds. One board flops ace, queen, 9 with 2 hearts, so we're pretty weak there. The next board comes and it's 5, 3, 3 with 2 diamonds, however. We have that board pretty locked up, losing only to quad 3s. With this many players, any overcard will give someone else a bigger boat though. Our hand is extremely unlikely to improve on any board. So when Jonathan leads for 50 and Mike calls, I just bomb the crap out of this thing with a pot-size raise. The dealer announces 375, when in actuality it should only be 275. The house takes 125 out of the pot, so playing 8-handed, that leaves only $75 in the pot. The players here don't count the rake as part of the pot, so it should have been 53 ways plus the 75 in the pot for a raise of 225 over the $50 bet. Regardless, both players fold, so I'm happy to take down the small pot with a hand that was completely unlikely to improve. 10 minutes later, Mike limps under the gun. I raised the action to 60 and the +1 with pocket queens. The ladies, the marvels of superhero action. Chase, who's quite possibly the tightest player in the table by leaps and bounds, 3 bets to 200 with a stack of about 2,000. Louis folds. Jonathan cold calls the $200 bet with a similar stack of about 2K. Here, Jonathan and I still have our nit buttons, but Chase does not. He's the least likely to be making a play right now. This puts me in a very uncomfortable spot. He's both a nit, and he doesn't have his nit button. There's a very good chance I'm behind here. However, I'm not about to set mine with freaking queens. It's actually cheaper for me to find out right now where I'm at using my superhero powers of live reads than to potentially call down on an all-low board and drop $2,000. So I decide to 4-bet to 600 and start studying Chase's reaction. His first motion is to move his cards towards the muck subtly. Oh, Chase, I know you watch my vlogs. You should know that I'm like the all-seeing eye in the sky. I notice everything. He eventually changes his mind and makes the call. If he were to suddenly jam here instead of calling, I would snap call because I've already noticed that his instinct wants to fold. So I know that I'm ahead. There's no doubt about that. Jonathan makes the call as well. So we go 3 ways in a nearly $2,000 pot to a flop of 9, jack, 4 with 2 hearts. This is not my favorite flop. I was putting one of them on a hand like 10s or jacks. I doubt Chase has jacks because he would have been faster to call pre-flop with such a big hand. And to be honest, Jonathan still has a nit button, so he can have anything here as well. He was definitely not getting the right price, regardless of what he's holding. I start with a really tiny down bet of 500 to see what my opponents think about this flop. Believe it or not, I can still fold my hand here if one of them decides to shove. Thankfully, Chase folds almost immediately, and Jonathan shows pocket 7s to the camera for the good old third stack failed set mine. Don't do that, guys. Jonathan would have needed to win over 4,000 in profit for that set mine to be profitable there, which means he would have needed to clean both Chase and I out completely to our bottom dollar. There's nothing mathematical or logical about that call, but hey, it sure helps the bank of Aero out. With this win, we're up 24.50 barely an hour into the session. This hand happens about 13 minutes later. David straddles to 10 under the gun +1, because you can straddle from any position in this game. Mike double straddles to 20 in the middle position. I look down at pocket queens, although I think it would have been more terrifying if they were suited. I'm basically first to act. About 80% of the hands in this game get raised pre-flop, and it should be especially tempting with all of this dead money. So I decided to get a little tricky and just limp for the 20 in the low jack. Chase folds in the hijack. Louis folds in the cutoff. Jonathan calls the 20 on the button. AJ folds in the small blind. Jake from Jake Poker Vegas folds in the big blind. We'll battle with him a little later though. Megan calls the 20 under the gun. David calls for 10 more in the original straddle, and Mike checks the double straddle. At this point, I'm hating life because my ruse didn't work. We go 5-handed to a 9-high flop, all clubs. I double check my hand and notice I'm holding the queen of clubs, so at least I have that small comfort. Megan and David both check, but Mike leads with a half-pot bet of 50. I mean to raise to 150, but I accidentally raised to 200 since I'm not working with my usual $5 chips that I'm used to. Jonathan suddenly cold calls on the button. This is highly alarming. Everyone else folds. I suspect there's a high likelihood he flopped a flush here, potentially even the nut flush. I don't actually know how Jonathan plays though. We didn't clash once the first time I played on their show the week prior, and I've never watched their stream prior to being invited to come. Edward from the Win tells me that he's an action player though, so if it turns out that he's not, I blame you, Ed. The turn brings a 5 of hearts. This doesn't improve us at all. I already think I'm behind when Jonathan cold calls though, so I start with a check. If Jonathan bets here, I'm just going to fold. Even the ace-high flush should bet when checked to here to get value out of a smaller flush, 2 pairs, or even a set. But when Jonathan puts in the check, I start to second guess myself if I'm really behind. The river is a king of hearts. That shouldn't change anything. Jonathan is either drawing to the ace-high flush or he's already flopped the flush. I check the action over to him again. Here, Jonathan suddenly ramrods my sphincter with a massive bet of $500, making me regret I limped pre-flop. This is either a flush or air. I suppose he could have a set some of the time, but I think Jonathan would have raised with any pocket pair. If he's betting for value, that's actually an incredibly good bet. Either I have the ace-high misdraw, which would fold to just a light sprinkle anyways, or he's targeting all of my strong hands that aren't a flush. If you have a made hand on a board like this, don't fire weak for like 200 or something. You don't make monsters very often. Your opponent either has nothing to call the smallest of your bets, or they have something worth paying you off. Go for the gold. You can see me tank here, very uncomfortable with my hand. I think he has either a flush or just ace-high. I only have to be right here 1 in 3 times since I'm facing a pot-sized bet for a call to be profitable. So with those odds in mind, I decide to make the call. And then I get shown the bad news as Jonathan flips over 5-8 of clubs for a flopped flush. Wah, wah, wah. There goes $720 down the drain. It's alright. We're still up just shy of $2,000 only an hour and 20 minutes into the session. 30 minutes later, I figure if something doesn't work the first time, try and try again. I limp under the gun this time with the ladies, except they're of the Wakandan variety. Chase and Louie limp as well. Jonathan raises the action up to 50, which for this table is actually a pretty weak raise. AJ folds in the cutoff. Jake 3-bets to 120 on the button. David folds in the small blind. Mike cold calls the 120 from the big blind. Alright, see? I'm not a liar. They raise on this table all the time. I figure it's time to set my plan into motion. I 4-bet to 450 after limping. Jonathan, who started the raising, folds his Jack-8 of diamonds quickly. Jake folds after making some small talk, asking me about why I'm a masked crusader. Mike, with his 3K stack, decides to fold his pocket 7s. I'm forced to show my pocket queens to get rid of my knit button. Mike goes rabbit hunting and discovers to his horror that he would have flopped quads. Quadzilla, for crying out loud. In all honesty, he made the right fold though. He might just barely be getting 10-1 on his call pre-flop, but that's assuming I'm willing to give him a complete double up. We're not playing 1-3 here. This is pro on pro action. His pair is too small to continue on the vast majority of boards. There are also boards where he'll make a set, but I won't offer another dollar, like any board containing an ace or a king. Fully connected boards like 7-8-9 or 6-7-8. There are times where he'll make a set and lose, like in the case of a monotone board where I end up making a 1-card flush. Overall, it was the right laydown. I'm just glad he made it. 15 minutes later, David blind raises to 100 under the gun. Every 10 likes that their stream gets, someone has to blind raise to 100. Mike folds in the +1. I 3-bet to 250 with ace-queen offsuit in the middle position. It folds around to Jake in the small blind, who cold 4-bets me to 600 with a stack of only 1,300. Everyone else quickly folds back to me. Jake has a Spanish poker channel on YouTube called Jake Poker Vegas with over 400,000 subscribers. Alright, I don't know what Jake has, but I do know that he still has his knit button. He hasn't made any crazy plays yet in his short time on stream, like the rest of the Absolute Nuts all-star crew, especially David, who really likes to get out of line on the button or whenever he has his knit button. However, with the $100 blind raise, we're all essentially sitting here with tiny tournament stacks. There have been multiple 3-bets in these similar situations where the winner ends up showing 4-5 offsuit. Everyone is just trying to get rid of their nit buttons, meanwhile steal dead money. I mean, he is essentially sitting there with 13 big blinds, and I have ace-queen. There's no way I'm just ever calling 350 more here. There's no logic to that. With a hand like ace-king or ace-queen, you'll likely miss 2 out of 3 flops. I'm not about to add 40% more to his stack, only to break a flop and then fold. He could easily be doing this with 10s or jacks, in which case there's too much trapped money for me to fold. He could also be doing this with some silly suited ace like ace-4 or ace-5 type of hand. People watch too much high-stakes poker and then try to recreate those action-packed plays in their small games. We're too shallow at this point for anything fancy, I think. So for those reasons, I decide to shove all in. Unfortunately, Jake snap calls and I get shown the bad news. He has a pair of Nigerian ladies. We flip over our hands and Jake decides he only wants to run it once. The flop comes 8, 4, 2 with 2 diamonds. No help from me there. I still have 3 aces remaining, plus the backdoor flush draw as well. You know the problem with Nigerian ladies though? They're usually pretty underfed. They can get pretty weak, especially when an ace of spades shows up on the turn. Whoop whoop! Nothing quite like making a bad assessment and then getting lucky. Since I'm holding one of his queens, it's looking pretty bleak for Jake the Snake Roberts. The 10 of diamonds on the river seals the deal. This win puts us up to a new high of the day at almost 3,500 barely 2 hours into the session. It's a full 30 minutes later before we play our next notable hand. Here, under the gun limps. AJ raises to 50 in the +1. The action folds all the way around to me in the small blind. I call with pocket deuces to set mine for this wonderful price of only $45 more. The flop comes 2, king, 7 with 2 clubs. Bada-ba-bing, ba-bing! I flop bottom set on a disconnected board, but it does have 2 clubs. I'm less concerned about that though. Again, I don't normally advocate ever slow playing a set this small. However, once again, I must reiterate that this is not a normal game. AJ is one of the last 2 remaining players who still has their nit button. If he beats me in this hand, he's automatically off the hook from paying that $175 nit tax. He's going to be trying extra hard to win here, especially when he's in position. I'm going to use that fact to my advantage. I start with a check. He should bet 100% of his range on this board. Surely enough, he does. He starts with a c-bet of 60, to which I smooth call. The turn comes a board pairing 7 of spades, increasing our hand to a full house, but also massively increasing the odds of any single pair catching up in case the river is another 7. The unlikely club draw is now drawing dead, however, unless AJ is also carrying the king of clubs, which, in a heads-up situation, especially with all these weird side games going on, is going to be extremely unlikely. I start with another check yet again. AJ bets 150 this time, with about 600 behind. If he has complete air, there's a very good chance he's going to blast off on the river to try to avoid the nit tax. In a normal 2-5 game, this is the point where I spring the trap, but here I'm using all of this extra info to simply flat call. The river brings a 9 of diamonds. I check for a 3rd time. Unfortunately, AJ checks the action back. He didn't have air. I show my full house, and he shows the last remaining deuce. I guess he figured he's beating flush draw, so he has some small amount of showdown value. I'm still happy to flop a set and get 2 streets of bets though. For this next hand, Mike makes an odd min-raise to 10 under the gun. I try to single him out with a substantial 3-bet to 130 in the +1 with 7 deuce offsuit. Remember, if I win the 7 deuce game, it's an additional $50 per player from the other 7 seeded players. The action folds to AJ in the cutoff, who cold calls the 130. Jake on the button folds, when Megan suddenly 4-bets to 430 in the small blind. David folds in the big blind. Whoops, this is not working out how I imagined it. It gets even worse when Mike 5-bets to an even $1,000. Alright, never mind. Mission abort. Abort! I'm out! Everyone ends up folding. Megan asks Mike if he had jacks beat, even though she was actually holding ace-10 of hearts, which she shows to the camera. I think this was a really strange play from her, considering she didn't even have her nit button. He answers not this time. We go rabbit hunting to see what would have happened. The flop comes out, queen, 7, deuce with 2 diamonds, turns a 3 of hearts, and rivers a 5 of hearts. Oh man, it would have been amazing to not only win the main pot with 7 deuce, but also get that extra $350. That would have been freaking great. Alas, it was not meant to be with how the action went. For this next hand, I limp under the gun with pocket 3s, which is a much stronger than normal limp considering I'm forced to also limp with hands like Jack 4 or King 5 offsuit to avoid the taunt attacks. Chase limps as well. Jonathan makes an unusually small raise to 30 in the middle position. AJ calls in the low jack. Jake calls in the cutoff. Megan folds on the button. David starts chanting Tana, Tana, so the rest of the table calls and Megan is forced to pay the Tana tax. We go 7 ways to a flop of Queen, 10, 5, Rainbow. The action checks around. I'm sitting here thinking, it'd be really nice if the turn was a random 3. So we go to a turn, which you already know is a 3 of diamonds. Yeah, baby! I'm telling ya, all that time I spend at the gym makes it easier to hit them sets. Here, after David checks, Mike leads with a bet of 100 into the pot of 215. The turn brought a backdoor flush draw on board. There's multiple straight draws, and we're also 7-handed. Yeah, no thanks. I raise the action up to 350. Everyone folds back around to Mike. Here, he thinks about his action for a little while, which is making me nervous. He has over $4,000 in his stack. I would hate to lose that much if he were holding pocket 5s, which is the only hand I'm realistically losing to. Every other hand would have played out differently. If he raises, I'm not going anywhere with the essential second nuts though. Thankfully, it doesn't come down to that. He folds, and I show my hand to get rid of my knit button. With this win, we're up $3,685 2 hours and 45 minutes into the session. Only 2 hands later, I'm in the small blind with pocket 9s. Jonathan limps under the gun. AJ raises to 60 with about 700 behind. Jake calls with an $1,100 stack. Megan and David both fold. Mike also makes the call on the button. There's almost $200 of dead money. In a normal game, I would just call here. I'm out of position and my hand can't withstand most flops. Except with everyone playing so passively, I figured they're up to their usual weird hands trying to get rid of their knit buttons. I actually wouldn't mind getting it in for the 750 that AJ has. You have to account for how wide these players are opening and how desperate they are to get rid of their knit buttons. AJ and Jake both have their knit buttons. Okay, I'm going to be honest. I'm about to make a pretty bad mistake here. If I had a premium hand like kings or queens, I would only make it about 250 to go. Very few people on the table have enough to set mine effectively against me. I guess because I'm out of position with a hand that can't withstand most boards, I decided to go really high. In retrospect, I can see how it seemed like a bluff. I raised the action up to 400. Everyone folds around to Mike, who is the one person I did not want a call from. He has position to me and a massive stack. So of course, he makes the call. Knowing Mike, he doesn't have an ace-high type of holding though. This should only ever be a pocket pair. The question is, whose is higher? I've seen him flat call David's $100 raise with pocket jacks. That's significantly higher than a $60 raise though. Is he doing it again with a pair higher than 9s? Or do we have him notched and he's holding 6s through 8s? He folded 7s to us earlier pre-flop, but he was out of position there, and it was admittedly versus a limp raise, as opposed to here where I might be holding 7 deuce. I totally forgot about that stupid 7 deuce game. My raise does smell admittedly fishy. I just hope that Mike's pair is smaller than mine. Thinking back, I totally regret how I played this hand, considering I'm an Asian man and not many people have a smaller pair. The flop comes 3, ace, ace, rainbow. I'm almost positive he doesn't have an ace-x type of holding here. This flop changes nothing. Whoever is ahead should still be ahead. I start with a small down bet of 200. Mike makes the call. The turn is a 7 of diamonds. Not my favorite. One of the few hands I was ahead of now makes a boat. In all honesty, I'm only beating 8s and 6s, and 6s can't even beat 7 deuce at this point. I should just check here. I guess Mike could be holding random suited Broadway cards like 10 jack all the way to king queen. I could deny equity against those types of hands with a small bet here. I decide 300 should be sufficient to get rid of all those types of hands. Mike calls again. Okay, we're definitely back to the drawing board with pair against pair. I'm only beating exactly 8s and losing to 10s. This is a really tricky situation. What is Mike thinking, I wonder? I'm sure he's losing to all ace combinations. He beats 7 deuce. I'm giving him the right price to call with my bets if he has either 8s or 10s. The river brings a deuce of diamonds, completing the backdoor flush. The pot is 1935 at this point. I'm not sure whether I'm ahead or behind, but there are way more hands that beat me compared to the one hand that I'm beating. If I check, I could face a potentially massive bet. What if he really did have a hand like 2 suited Broadway cards, but of the diamond variety? What if he turns his hand into a bluff? In all honesty, I hate the way I played this hand from pre-flop. I think my 3-bet was definitely too big and out of position no less. It would have been infinitely better to simply flat the $60 raise. And yet here we are. We're at this junction where we wonder how we got here, and which mistakes led to this point, hoping we could take it all back. I decide on a blocker bet of 400. I would prefer a check here, but here we are. Mike makes the call. I show my pocket nines, and he shows he has me one notched with pocket tens. Wow, I didn't expect him to flat so strong on the button. It really worked out this time. I admit, this is the worst hand I played all night. I lose $1,300 this hand, but I'm still up pretty considerably for the night. I pick myself back up and vow to do better. One round later, I'm given the opportunity to redeem myself. David and Mike limp. I bump the action up to $80 in the middle position, with my friends known as the boys. It folds to Jonathan, who 3-bets to 220 in the cutoff. The action folds around to Mike, who suddenly cold calls the 220 3-bet. Wow, that's strong. We know how he likes to slow play his medium pocket pairs. Maybe he even has a hand as strong as queens here and was planning to limp raise when suddenly faced with two larger than normal raises. Against these particular two and with their large raises, my only option here is to call. My hand isn't strong enough to do anything else. The flop comes 7, 7, 6, rainbow. I'm a pretty huge fan of this flop. We didn't improve, but a flop like this can gain us a lot of information. When Mike checks, I check it over to Jonathan to see how he wants to proceed. He checks the action back. I guess it's hard for him to c-bet when Mike cold called the $220 3-bet after limping. That's almost certainly a higher pair than the board. Personally, I'm aggressive as heck and would c-bet that flop even with my ace-queen and ace-king type holdings, but that's just me. The turn brings gin. It's a jack of clubs. And now I feel like Spider-Man, flying across the rooftops. I'm like, whee! I think everyone is drawing dead at this point. I think if Mike had queens or higher, we would have found out by now. And Jonathan definitely has an ace-x type of hand. I suppose I could go for a tiny milky bet here for like 150. That would definitely work in a 1-3 or 2-5 stake to induce calls from dead draws or potentially even an airball raise. I'm not battling 1-3 or 2-5 players though. I'm battling Mike the freaking Grinder, 6-time gold bracelet winner with more cash winnings than I can hope to amass in multiple lifetimes. I have to give him the respect of a solid check, hoping Jonathan will take a stab at the pot. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. There's an extremely high chance it will definitely happen in a lower stakes game though. People in those stakes can't acknowledge when their airball bluffs make no sense. We go to a river, which is the inconsequential 5 of diamonds. Mike checks again. Sad times. I was hoping he would bet for value by now. Time to go for a tiny bit of value. I bet 40% of the pot with a bet of 300. Jonathan folds, showing the camera he made a super light 3-bet with king 10 of spades, but Mike makes the call. I show, and of course we're good. Mike says we got unlucky because he had a hand that was worth raising. At least we recover $750 from our blunder in the last hand. About 25 minutes later, I'm really sad. Mike is supposed to blind raise in the big blind for this hand, but he forgets. It would have been awesome considering I'm holding pocket freaking rockets again. Rambo, let's go! This is the 4th time I've had them on stream. I didn't bother showing one of the other times because I just open raised and everyone folded, picking up like 25 or 30 bucks or something. I want to make all the keyboard warriors upset, so I limp under the gun. Oh, but Aero, that's such a noob move! Try mimicking my win rate if you think it's such a noob move. The thing you need to understand is that every table is different. There's a raise on this table at least 80% of the time, and often even 3 and 4 bets with hands that are barely even strong enough to open raise in the first place. I'm out of position, and I'm also way too deep. If no one 3-bets me, I'd be giving the whole table great odds to set mine. Not to mention, sometimes I like to limp raise with extremely weak hands to pretend like I actually limped with aces or kings. Whatever style you play, you're fine as long as there's some semblance of balance. Sometimes raise small with your monsters to protect your speculative hands, and sometimes limp raise with garbage to pick up dead money and protect your actual monsters. So here, Chase also limps in the +1. Jonathan raises to 50 in the middle position. AJ and Jake both fold. Megan suddenly 3-bets to 150 on the button. Earlier, Jonathan 3-bet to 220 with king 10 of spades, and before that, Megan 4-bet on the button with ace 10 of hearts to 440. So you have to remember that this gang loves to raise and get out of line. Oh, but it doesn't stop there. David suddenly 4-bets to 450 from the small blind. Now imagine if there had been a blind $100 raise this hand. Gee golly gosh. If I were in position, I would consider just flatting here. 450 is a pretty big raise. However, with all of the raising going on, and the fact that of these raisers, only David still has his knit button, I'm hoping that one of these dingleberries actually has a real hand, like queens or better. At this point, I'm well over 5k deep, so I can't mess around. I put in a cold steel, limp, 5-bet to 1200. Unfortunately, Megan only had ace-queen offsuit, and David only had King Jack of hearts, so they were easy folds for everyone. Had I known they were that weak, I probably would have only just flatted. You never know though, the flop could be anything. You can never celebrate until the river. I'm glad to take down over $650 without a fight. These last two victories more than made up for my blunder with the pocket nines, putting us to a new height for the session at $4,039, 3 hours and 45 minutes in. 20 minutes later, we play our last notable hand of the night. Megan straddles to 10 on the button. David and Mike both call in the blinds. I limp under the gun with pocket fours. Everyone limps around to Jake, who folds in the cutoff. We're all chanting for the taunt attacks, when Megan suddenly raises the action up to 60 on the button. David and Mike both fold. I recognize this is a weak raise for the amount of limpers, especially in the stakes we're playing. So I put in a sneaky limp raise to 260. Everyone else folds, but Megan makes the call with a stack of about 3,500. I'm putting her on a hand like ace-10, ace-jack, or ace-queen at best. I'm almost certain I'm ahead at this point in time. The flop comes 5, jack, 10, with 2 diamonds and 1 spade. If she had pocket 10s or jacks, she would raise bigger pre-flop. I like to keep 100% of her hands in, with a small down bet to 100. If she had a hand like 10 jack suited, we'll find out real quick on this wet board, and I'll be able to fold our hand cheaply. She just calls, so I think there's a good chance we're still ahead. At best, she might have ace-jack. The turn is a 6 of spades, putting 2 spades to go along with the 2 diamonds. Time to up the ante. With how I've been playing tonight, I'm going to force a hand like ace-10 or even ace-jack to fold. I throw out a respectable bet of 500. Megan quickly folds, so we show our hand and get rid of our nid button. I actually make plays like this quite often since I play in a deep stack game, so just because I limp raise doesn't always mean I'm holding a telegraphed hand like aces or kings. We play for another 15 minutes before the table breaks, finalizing the game with another $100 9-way flip. The cameraman actually wins the flip, with David and Jonathan sponsoring his buy-in, so good for him. I was able to catch up with Mike the Grinder for a quick interview as we were cashing out. You're with Mike, $17 million tournament winnings. So how did you know to call with the pocket 10s pre-flop that hand?
It was more like it was a situation where we both had huge stacks in front of us, and then I was in position that hand, and just wanted to just been playing position. I just had a feeling that the best hand, you could have 7 deuce in that situation too.
Yeah, that's true. What about the 7s? Why would you fold that one? Is it similar? We're both similarly stacked, but you're out of position there.
The 7's a little different situation. I had my stack was much smaller at that point.
For the 7s? I thought it was about the same.
No, I had like maybe, I think I had like
3K.
1,500, 1,600.
Oh, that's it? Oh, I thought you had at least 3K there.
2K, I didn't have that much.
Well, thank you for not stacking me that hand. You were flopped quads, buddy.
Glad you won, brother.
All right, good night. In for 2,000 and out for 61.52 for a massive profit of 4,152 after 4 hours and 22 minutes of playtime. I have to admit, I received a ridiculous number of great hands this session. I also ran extremely well, beating out Jake's pocket queens when I had ace-queen. I'm just glad I was able to hold my own in their game after my embarrassing debut. Again, if you want to get in on the wild, crazy action that happens in this game every Friday and Saturday night at Resorts World, just contact the Absolute Nuts team on their Instagram. I want to give them a great big shout out for inviting me to play in their game. They have the most friendly, fantastic crew, and they invite famous people and celebrities in their game every week, so make sure to check them out. They also have the most fabulous production in their videos that I've ever seen. Check out the one they have with Andrew Nemi. If you watched this far, I hope you like what you've seen. This is probably going to be my longest vlog to date. If you like what you saw today, please like this video. It only takes a quick second, but it helps more than you know. In fact, it'll likely help my channel grow. Subscribe to my channel for more tips and tricks on how to crush low-stakes poker. If you're interested, I also offer personal one-on-one coaching either in person or via video call. You can find out more details over on my Patreon, where you can also find more of my coaching series. October will feature a brand new Acolyte. I'm anxious to see how I can turn this new Acolyte around. Speaking of Acolyte, we now have to figure out who won the grand prize for the month of September. There were a total of 8 contestants. For those of you who are unfamiliar, this is known as an 8-sided dice. It's commonly used by nerds and geeks, such as myself, to play games like Dungeons & Dragons. In the order of raffle winners, we have the following. Darium Dash coming in at number 1, SoCal Bum coming in at number 2, Marto the Martian at number 3, Steve Lau at number 4, Eddie Z at number 5, CSS Luck at number 6, Lax Playa at number 7, and Sean Valken at number 8. So now let's roll the dice to see who won. Coming in at number 3, we have Marto the Martian. Congratulations, you Canadian bastard. you get your choice of either $500 or having me personally coach you to improve your game. Thank you everyone for competing in the raffle this past month. Even if you didn't win anything, I really appreciated all of the comments. As always, I hope to see you in the next video.